webinar MOIC session 2020. My name is Madhyasta Budi Pradana. I become your moderator for this evening today. I want to say I would like to give some congratulations to all the participants who managed to participate in this session from all the way from the first one in April until now, the sixth one. And we'll be continuing on, inshallah, in this month. So before I will continue, I would like to give some also congratulations and remarks to the special guests, to Mr. Shafi Effendi, our president of ICOT Indonesia, and then second to Miss Tukba Jaren Sersi, project department of ICYF, and also Mr. Kama Pradipta Isnomo, Director of Socio-Cultural Affairs and International Organization of Developing Countries, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Republic of Indonesia. And then I also give remarks and greeting to all the panelists who arrived in this evening. First to Mr. Enes Ostoprak, expert and model OIC supervisor of ICYF. And then to Mr. Munir Al-Kari, Middle East North Africa policy and economic specialist. Now, we're going to move on to our next agenda. We'll go to the Tilawatil Quran. Will be opened by Mr. Ronnie. For Mr. Ronnie, time is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good evening, everyone. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي فمن يكفر بالطاغوت ويؤمن بالله فقد استمسك بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله سميع عليم صدق الله العظيم.
Thank you, Mr. Ronnie, for such a graceful Tilawatil Quran. Hopefully, our prayer in this Ramadan day will become barakah and give to all of us, especially in this crucial time during the epidemic time. Now, let's go to the other agenda that will give the floor to our Secretary General of OIC Youth Indonesia, Ms. Astrid Nadia Rizkita, to give reports about the agenda of our organization. For Ms. Astrid, time is yours.
Thank you, moderator. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
First of all, I thank Allah for giving us this opportunity to gather here in this webinar, despite the difficult times we face globally, and as we reach the 18th day of the blessed month of Ramadan. I would like to give my best greetings to the welcoming speakers present. Firstly, Mr. Shafi Effendi, the President of OIC Youth Indonesia. He's been with us in every webinar, joining online from different cities in each session, as his occupation revolves around people to people. So as you can see, Not even a pandemic can stop him. Although, Abang, we have yet to emulate you as a good entrepreneur and not as good as you are in selling, but your entrepreneurial spirit, especially in risk taking and innovating, is very contagious to us. And we'd like to thank you for leading the way. Tonight, OIC Youth Indonesia is supported by the welcoming speakers present, namely ICYF and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Republic of Indonesia. My best greetings to Ms. Tubajaran, the Director of Project Department at ICYF, in which the Model OIC is one of the flagship projects of ICYF, and the Secretariat has been very helpful in supervising us and observing our sessions, be it small scale or large scale. We really thank you for your time. And to Mr. Kamapradipta Isnomo, the Director of Social Cultural of International Organization of Developing Countries of Ministry of Foreign Affairs Republic of Indonesia, who have been giving your precious time for this session. We thank you for your kindness. And for the panel speakers tonight, Mr. Enes Ostoprak, the expert and model OIC supervisor of ICYF, and Mr. Munir Al-Akari, Middle East and North Africa policy and economic specialist based in London. It's great to see you all here. For information, this webinar session is the sixth session of Model OIC webinar series held by the OIC Youth Indonesia in the framework of Model OIC Indonesia National Team activity held weekly. The webinar series serves as a roadmap to the National Virtual Conference of Model OIC we plan to do soon. The Model OIC is the academic simulation of OIC directly supervised by ICYF, in which again, the welcoming speaker from project department and panel speaker from Model OIC supervisor have been present majority of the time and supervising us throughout the learning journey. We aim to introduce OIC as the second largest intergovernmental organization after the UN and its affiliated organ concerning youth affairs, the ICYF, as well as the activity, the Model OIC. Students from all over Indonesia, majority from Jabodetabek region, have joined our sessions as a continuation of our previous university roadshows prior to the pandemic. For the Model OIC webinar this evening, we'll try to delve deeper on the latest issues in OIC and the decision-making culture of international organizations. Hopefully, we all benefit from this session. Thank you for your time. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for Ms. Astrid, our Secretary General of ISO Indonesia, for providing us the report of the ongoing agenda that have we done here in OISU Indonesia. Hopefully give you all the insight of what we do in this organization to provide more knowledge and insight, especially during in this epidemic crucial time. Now, we're going to move on to our next agenda, the opening remarks. The first one will be delivered by our Honorable President, Mr. Shafi Effendi, the President of OIC Youth Indonesia. For Mr. Shafi, time is yours.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah alamal Quran, alamal insan, malam ya'lam. Asyhadu alla ilaha wa la syarikalah wa asyhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Alhamdulillah. Happy fasting to my friends and our seniors at the webinars and all participants. Before, special thanks for speakers and moderator, my brother Enes Ostopak from expert and model OIC professor of ICYF, and brother Munir Al-Akari from MENA Policy and Economic Specialist, and welcome to Social Affairs and International Organization Developing Countries MOFA RI, and Sukba Green Gersi from Director of Projects Department at ICYF. Thank you for time. Thank you for the opportunity. And special man from Jakarta, my brother Madista Budi Pradana. Thank you for the session. Uh, my name is Shafi Effendi. I'm the president of OIC Indonesia. For information for you, OIC Indonesia is one of the big Islamic youth organization in Indonesia, and we are connected to 57 Muslim country in the world and share information, share information, share energy of spirit Islamic civilization. Since the beginning of Ramadan, this is the 10 webinar series of OIC Indonesia. 6 of them are model OIC. For us, COVID-19 will not reduce our fighting spirit, to build our Islamic civilization. For us, COVID-19 is the window of opportunity, make us aware that change is a certainty. Change is very close to us. Change is give us a whole new perspective. Finally, as a young Muslims, the world, we cannot just be quiet. Our talks, our ideas, our energy, our critical reasoning. Okay. May Allah unite Muslims and mankind all over to both increasingly remember Allah and Rasulullah Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Stop being a destroyer on earth and return to being a good leader according to what Allah has commanded us humanity to descend our on earth. Let's wake up past the pandemic with a great courage. We show a friendly Islam, beautiful Islam, intelligent Islam, intellectual Islam. Islam is a rahmatan lil alamin. Thank you for all. Thank you for the session. Thank you for the time. Wallahu wafiq illa abu amitorik. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shafi Effendi, our president of ISUT Indonesia, for his remarks to the session. Hopefully give us so motivation to keep continue on pursue our goal. Now we're going to our second opening remarks. She is from the ICYF, Ms. Tukba Jansersi, Project Department of ICYF. The floor is yours, Miss.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear distinguished guests and young leaders, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would like to begin my statement by welcoming and thanking you all for joining Model OIC Indonesia 6th edition online webinar that was initiated by respected OIC Indonesia and its unique team at the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic. I am privileged and honored to be with you today at the opening session. I would like to also welcome respected officials of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Indonesia, as well as valuable panelists who will deliver fruitful session today with your effective participation. During month of blessed Ramadan, may Allah makes easier this difficult time for you and for your families with health, inshallah. As the world is going through unprecedented change, everyone needs to join their efforts to work collectively and support each other during this difficult time. That's why I highly appreciate OIC Youth Indonesia's effort for actively contributing to well-being of Indonesian youth by organizing effective programs during the pandemic. We are facing with different levels of new abnormal, and all of us trying harder each and every day to get used to the new normal and its consequences. While OIC region coping with different issues and matters until now, COVID-19 pandemic unfortunately opened new doors of crisis and challenges in OIC region, such as insufficient health systems, unstable economy, raising rate of the unemployment, and uncertainty of tomorrow. With the emergence of novel coronavirus, importance of youth participation in decision-making process and finding solutions within all actors become more critical than any time. However, it is also the time where young leaders are requested to be on the table by their own efforts and motivation to combat against the results of the pandemic. I would like to refer United Nations highlights on the youth participation is that participation promotes the well-being and development of young people. It is by questioning, expressing their views, and having their opinions taken seriously that young people develop skills, build competences, acquire confidence, and form aspirations. It's a virtuous cycle. The more opportunities a young person has for meaningful participation, the more experienced and competent he or she becomes. This allows more effective participation, which in turn enhances development. So if we are seeking and expecting for highly skilled leaders, enhancing youth participation at every level is a unique solution. There are different type of sample models of youth participation, as you are already practicing within the OIC Youth Indonesia at the moment. And also one of the strongest sample from Indonesia itself is the youth councils and parliaments structured within the country. And another point that I would like to underline, MOIC is a key solution where you can practice all of these models with just being part of Model OIC network. Moreover, it will enable you to understand decision-making culture of intergovernmental and supranational organization with its unique concept. I will leave this topic to my dear colleague, Mr. Enes, to explain you more about it. So what are the other ICYA projects and contributions towards creating effective decision-making culture? We are organizing annual OIC Young Leaders Summits. And if it's the term of the Islamic Heads of Summit, we are also organizing as a pre-event of Islamic Heads of States, where young people work on recommendation papers and submit to the Islamic Head of States. Youth CFM is a pre-event of OIC CFM, again, where young people adopt decisions and draft resolutions on the same agenda of CFM by submitting it as well. So developing youth policies are the key solution when it comes to the active participation of youth. As ICYF, we are calling the OIC member states to help developing youth policies in enhancing youth participation at the national and global level, while organizing, as I mentioned before, Young Leaders Summit, forums, diplomacy academies, which provide effective platforms where young people can discuss and solve common issues of OIC geography. Before I conclude my speech, I would like to update you on our ICYF ongoing activities. As ICYF, since the beginning of COVID-19, we have transformed many of our programs into the online format to serve Muslim youth in a best way within the great efforts of passion of ICYF team day and night. One of them is the special edition talks where we are hosting ministers of youth and support of the OIC member states, decision makers in participation with the youth, that they can directly interact with speakers to speak about topics which fall under the interest of youth, such as economic empowerment, capacity building, education, and sustainable development. On Tuesday, at 3 p.m. according to Turkish time GMT +3, you can have the details. We are going to host His Excellency Minister of Youth and Support of the Mali accordingly. So other program we are going to kick off, the first session is going to be the Islamic intellectual heritage. The program seeks to promote awareness about Muslim intellectual contributions to science, cultural exchange, and global civilization. So you will have a chance to catch up our first opening session tomorrow, which is going to be organized by the valuable participation of ICESCO and IRSICA, who are the leading institutions who are working on the heritage and culture within the OIC structure. And at the moment, we finalize our Ideaton Challenge in cooperation with Hamad bin Khalifa University, and very soon we are going to share with you the promotion of illustrated ideas where young people share their individual and their communities' strategy to cope with the COVID-19 and also their assumptions regarding the post-corona world. On 18th of May, we are going to launch our online volunteering training program, which is one of the most important solution for the COVID-19 process There are opportunities for young volunteers where they can contribute for their community actively and effectively, even via online volunteering. So at the moment, our Ramadan contest is online. You are all invited to share with us how is your Ramadan at home. And also we are having journey through the Quran, the world's first digital Quran course covering all 114 surahs in 6 days. Last but not least, good news for MOICers. We will soon announce call for applications of ICYF first virtual model OIC simulation, and it's for online webinar series during next week. All interested audiences and welcome to contribute to discussion and to apply for these constructive projects and programs. Please don't miss out on this chance to listen and to learn from our international experts and decision makers. I would like to remind all of you, while my dear colleague and also other valuable participants are going to highlight the importance of the youth participation, I just want to remind you that if there is no seat for you, please go and grab your chair to be there. I once again thank you all for your attention, and I wish you all of you happy and blessed Ramadan, inshallah. Lastly, special thanks to the President of OIC Youth Indonesia and respected organizing team for their efforts during these hard times. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you, Ms. Tokbajar and Sersi from ICYF for her wonderful speech and remark to all of us. Hopefully, it will give us more motivation on how we can continue on pursue in MOIC and many other agenda. And we were informed that Ms. Tukba are going to have to attend to another meeting, which is very important also. First of all, we from OIC Youth Indonesia would like to give a great thank you very much for Ms. Tukba for having a time to attend in this webinar. And we are very thankful and grateful that you give us such and wonderful remarks, Miss. Thank you very much from us as OIC Youth Indonesia. And now we are going to our third opening remarks. I will give the floor to Mr. Kama Bripta from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And yeah, I give the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, moderator. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to all my brothers and sisters who are connected online with us tonight. Mr. Shafi Effendi, President of OIC Youth Indonesia, terima kasih atas sambutannya. Ms. Tukba Cheren Chersi, Project Department of ICYF, Tashekuler for the statement and opening statement. Distinguished speakers, participants, and brothers and sisters. It is indeed an honor for me on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia to be present before all of you this evening at this very highly renowned event called Model OIC Indonesia webinar. Usually during this seminar, we gather in a spacious room where we can have good eye contact and personal interaction between all of us. But unfortunately, because of current situation we are confronted at the moment, we are forced to interact through through the Zoom connection. This is something that we have to continuously adapt. As I can quote from Charles Darwin, that survival of the fittest is not the survival of the most powerful, but of who can adapt of constant changes. And I think in Islam also we have to continuously adapt to the changing times, to the changing environment that we all live. I think Islam teaches us to be solidarity, to be tolerant, to be forgiving, and this is a strong basis for all of us Muslims to be adaptive to the change of time. Distinguished participants, for those who are new and to refresh our knowledge on OIC, allow me to begin by sharing some background information regarding the organization. The OIC is one of the most important organizations for Indonesia it was stated earlier that it's the second biggest organization after the United Nations. And we have been very active ever since its inception back in 25th September of 1969, following the crisis of Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied Jerusalem. Since then, Indonesia has been investing much of its foreign policy and energy and resources to support OIC. We are an active member that participates in various OIC forums under the organization and collaborates with all and every individual member states to achieve the objectives and principles enshrined under the OIC Charter, namely, number one, enhance and consolidate the bonds of fraternity and solidarity. Two, support an independent Palestinian homeland. Third, strengthen intra-Islamic economic and trade cooperation. Fourth, achieve sustainable comprehensive human development and economic well-being. Fifth, combat illicit drug and trafficking. And lastly, to promote cooperation in social and cultural fields. Ladies and gentlemen, over the years, Indonesia has consistently pursued a very strong and robust foreign policy at the multilateral and also regional levels that are in line and consistent with all the OIC baseline positions. We have been very loyal and we have been very consistent with all OIC based positions. Up until now, we have no diplomatic relations with Israel, which is continued to occupy Palestinian until this present day. And we do not recognize Israel at the moment as they are still occupying the land of our brothers and sisters of Palestine. OIC for Indonesia is not only a matter of political engagement, it is also an avenue where Indonesia also promotes its economic, social, and cultural interest within the organizations. I'll give you one recent example that we have been very active, which is in the field of medicine and also health. Most recently, about 2 years ago, Indonesia was entrusted by the OIC to become the OIC Center of Excellence for Vaccines and Biotechnology Products. So this was an honor for us to be given and granted this Center of OIC Excellence by OIC member states. And thus far, we have established and also provided many technical cooperations and capacity buildings to many OIC member countries in the fields of medicines, vaccines, and biotechnology products. This position was endorsed during the 6th OIC Health Ministerial Conference that was held in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia back in December 2017. As you know, Indonesia has a very strong and also robust and high level of maturity of pharmaceutical industry. As of now, we have produced 14 vaccines that have been approved by the WHO, by the World Health Organizations. And these vaccines are being provided to all countries of the UN, including OIC member countries. At the moment, in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are working closely with all our partners, the WHO and other international community, to combine our resources to focus on our research to find vaccines for COVID-19, and also to focus our resources to step up and scale up production for medicines that have been labeled as effective to cure COVID-19. And in this respect, we continue to share our experience with all OIC member countries. And we have done so during the OIC Steering Committee on Health, which was held on 9th of April 2020. This was held under the leadership of the United Arab Emirates, and our health minister participated in the meeting, in which during the meeting, our health minister conveyed measures that have been taken at the national level to overcome the pandemic, and appeal for the support of OIC Center of Excellence on Vaccines and Biotechnology, and also appeal to all other OIC member countries to help each other and to provide necessary assistance, be it vaccines, medicines, or other humanitarian needs that are in desperate needs for OIC member countries that are confronted with this pandemic. Before I conclude, I'd like to convey my own message. Although political issue is very important for OIC, and also although political issue is very important for all the youth to discuss, perhaps as a humble suggestion from me, it would be also be best to focus on issues that can be felt directly by the everyday people in OIC member countries. And what are those issues? These issues entail prosperity. These issues entails employment. These issues entail livelihoods, food security, health, education, science. These are the issues that must be focused and must be discussed by OIC youth throughout the world. I am not saying that political issues is less important. It is indeed important, but for the future, down the road, in 10, 20 years down the road, the OIC will be more relevant if we have a more competitive edge in the fields of science, health, education, research, and issues that can bring prosperity to all the Ummah in OIC member countries. I think that's one point I wanted to bring across to all of you before I conclude. Once again, I wish to highly appreciate all the OIC Youth Indonesia for arranging this meeting. This initiative, of course, is very significant and concrete to support our collective effort to continuously increase our overall engagement and contribution to the OIC. And finally, to all the speakers and participants, I wish you success and healthy in this challenging time. And I wish you all the best in conducting your Ramadan observance this month. And I wish all the fruitful and blessings bestowed upon all of us by the Almighty Allah. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mr. Kama Pradipta from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for his remarkable remarks and speeches. Hopefully will give us so many motivation to keep learning, keep pursue our goal, especially during this crucial time in the pandemic where we are very limited, but still have spirit to learn more, especially to learn more about diplomacy and international relations. Now, we are going to move on to our next agenda. This is the agenda you all be waiting for from the first agenda. This is the panelist session that will given by our both of our speaker about on this MOIC webinar introduction. So for the first speaker, before I will give you some brief bio, I will share some. So for the first speaker, his name is Mr. Enes Ostoprak. He is the expert and model OIC supervisor at ICYF, and his educational background is from international relation from Istanbul Cultural University. Therefore, he is very have high knowledge, insight about model OIC, and hopefully his presentation would give us so many insight about the model OIC itself. And other experience you can see from the list over here. He also model UN as well from the ISEC and have honor certificate and many more. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Mr. Anas Ostaprak from STYF, our expert and supervisor in model IC. Time is yours.
Thank you very much, brother. It was actually kind of flattering. Thank you for your kind words and kind introduction to to our valuable audience. It's been my, I think, third time to be here and speak in front of you guys. And today our topic is going to be, I'm going to talk about the, in general, OIC structure and what I have experienced from my personal life. Let me just briefly tell you how OIC works in general. So as you may know, OIC has a different structure than the UN. In UN, we know that there's a General Assembly, there's a Security Council, there are UNDP, UNESCO, there are many other institutions like depend on UN. But the main body in United Nations, as we know, is United Nations Security Council, which makes it most efficient and most effective international organization in the world. But when we look at the OIC, there's not such a case, and that's why I want to share this differences between two institutions. OIC is the second largest in terms of membership. It has 57 members, but due to the war in Syria, they have suspended Syrian government's application in 2010. So now we have 56 active members in OIC, and still it's the second largest international organization in the world. We have four different, we have spread it into four different continents and three different groups. We have Asian group, Arab group, and African group. Turkey and Albania, they are also belong to the Asian group. But as you can understand from its name, Arab group and African group, they are particularly for African countries and particularly for Arab countries. Countries like Algeria, Morocco, they are the part of Arab group, by the way. Still, they are located in Africa, but they are the part of Arab group. So OIC has, as the highest authority, OIC has Islamic summits. In Islamic summits, it's held at once in 3 years. And in Islamic summits, the countries are represented by its highest level, whether it's the president of the country or the prime minister of the country, whoever is in the highest authority. OIC, in OIC Islamic Summit, the countries are represented in the highest level. So what Islamic summits are doing, they mainly discuss about the agenda of OIC for the next 3 years of term, and they have also selected the new chairman of the organization. So they have the superior power of OIC, but mainly they are the one who sets the agenda and who actually draw a line for the other committees of OIC to work on. On below of the Islamic Summit, we have Council of Foreign Ministers. Every year, this Council of Foreign Ministers are gathering. The last one, actually, this year in 2020, it was supposed to held in Niger in April 2 to 4th April, but due to this coronavirus, it has also postponed. Council of Foreign Ministers, as you can understand, the foreign ministers of the countries, member countries, are supposed to be here, and they are the highest council in terms of adopting the resolution. So OIC in general, they are gathering in terms of ministerial conferences. There are tourism minister conference, there are health ministers conferences, there are ministers of youth and sports, there are minister of family, women, and as many ministry as you can think. There are ministers, there are conference of OIC. So the recommendations and the resolution paper that has passed in these conferences, they are submitted to Council of Foreign Ministers, and the Council of Foreign Ministers are the one who approve these resolutions. So this is generally the how the decision-making process works in OIC. So Council of Foreign Ministers are the one who adopts these resolutions. So below the Council of Foreign Ministers, we have General Secretariat. We have the Secretary General of OIC, and there's a secretariat. It's located in Jeddah. Normally, in the establishment of OIC, the headquarters of the OIC is supposed to be in Jerusalem. But as you Al-Quds, as you all know, since the Al-Quds are under occupation, temporarily, OIC General Secretariat is located in Jeddah right now. So Below the General Secretariat, we have standing committees, as I mentioned before, standing committees for human rights, standing committees for women, family issues, as many issues that you can think. We have a standing committees for each topic. And under this standing committees, we have specialized organs, and under that, we have affiliated organs like ICYF. So the differences between affiliated organization and specialized organization in OIC, they are directly connected to the OIC General Secretariat. Their presidents, they are appointed by OIC General Secretariat itself, but in the affiliated organization, the structure and the process is different than the specialized organ. So this is actually the general understanding of the OIC structure. So how they pass the resolution, as you can see in the delegate manual, OIC has a consensus method during these resolution passing processes. So it has, like, at the same time has positive ways and negative ways, in my opinion. Consensus is kind of struggle to achieve sometimes, but it also keep the environment of brotherhood at the same time, because when you think about consensus, when you say consensus, it means when you pass a resolution, when you try to take an action, when you take a decision, 56 member states has to agree on. So they have to accept the decision that you're about to make. So it means you have to make sure that each and every country in OIC has to be satisfied on this document. So this is actually, it's really hard and impossible thing to achieve if you think the globally, and if you think the international level. It's impossible to make satisfied in each and every country in an organization. When you think about the Ummah, when you think about OIC, it's even much more harder. Even we believe Islam is the one who is the umbrella under who brings all these 56 members together, right? But there are still many differences that we are facing culturally, religiously, and like there are many issues, there are many conflicts that we are facing today, and it makes even harder today to take in concrete actions today in OIC. That's why one of the biggest challenges that I see in OIC, why OIC is not effective as UN. One of them is we are not that much comprehensive that we can, because in UN we have more than 200 members, but in OIC we have 56. That's why you cannot, we are not that much comprehensive. And other issue, UN has its Security Council, UN has its sanction power, but in OIC we don't have a sanction power, we don't have a Security Council, we don't have a military power to impose the decisions that have been taken in the Council of Foreign Ministers or other standing committees of OIC. So that's why most of the resolutions that are passed in CFM or the other standing committees that are mostly recommendations or suggestions to the OIC member states. So in general, when whatever we pass, if a country does not apply that resolution, there is nobody in OIC that can put sanction or force that country to do so. So this is one of the biggest challenges that I see, because every time we try to take an action, that's why it lays down really in you cannot take, like, you cannot put some detailed or really effective or concrete resolution or action in OIC. So that's why most of the resolutions that are passed is mostly recommendations and suggestions. So I don't want to keep it long. I'll just I want to share some personal story that I have experienced in my last ICYSM. In 2017, I have attended the first time to a real actual conference. For me, it was actually kind of unique opportunity for me, because in 2013, I have started doing MUNs. For 4 years, I have done many conferences. I have organized, attended in many conferences, but I was not be able to think that the simulation that we are doing in MUNs and Model IC actually was the same, exactly the same simulations of these UN and OIC. What I'm trying to say here, the environment that we created, like the discussions, the fightings, like, you know, the tension, when you try to pass a resolution, when you try to convince the other delegate, when you try to lobby, the entire atmosphere that you're facing in Model OIC actually are the same in the real conferences. In 2017, I have attended the third ISO-ASM Islamic Conference Youth and Sports Minister that was held in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, and I have witnessed some occasions in there. So in the actual conference, in the actual session, there are ministers over there that are discussing, but the real job, the real discussion happen on the closed doors, when there is like most of the time when there is a coffee break, the delegations they are gathering there, and they are discussing the resolution paper, because the ministers they don't submit the resolution. Actually, they submit the resolution, but they don't work on it. Their delegation works on it, right? So the ministers are there, they represent the country, but they are the one who makes the final submission. The one that who is doing the real job is their delegation, like the experts, other diplomats or the ambassadors are discussing the real issue, or the representative from OIC General Secretariat. So I was be able to participate one of these discussions when there was actual meeting was going on. There was another discussion on closed doors, where there were around 20 or 30 people gathered from each country. They were discussing the resolution paper. So one delegate from Bahrain, if I'm not mistaken, there was a sentence. It was written, all necessary actions. It was written on the document like this. So this delegate of Bahrain, he insists to rephrase that sentence as necessary action. So when you hear it, is it that much different? I think it's not. Like when you say it, all necessary action rather than necessary action, it doesn't make any like effect, or I don't know. For me, there is not too much difference. But basically, that delegate from Bahrain, he fought for the other delegates for 2 hours just to delete the word of all. He wanted to, make it clear that all necessary action will not be there. It's just necessary action is enough for his understanding. It could be the due to this interpretation in Arabic language. It might understand in different ways, but in the same time he has other agendas or other understanding towards that matter. So, but he basically locked the entire committee just to make sure that the word of all would be deleted, and he achieved that. He at the end of the day, the resolution has passed as necessary action. So first, what I saw, and it was like, when I say he fought, he basically fought. Like there was like even threats to you can see the tension inside of the room. You can see that the diplomats are yelling to each other just to make sure that their sayings are approved, or their country's agenda will approve. So this is actually why I'm saying that the simulations that we're having today is really important, because you don't know what is your career is going to lead you. You don't know, maybe in one day you're going to end up in one of these rooms and you're going to represent your country in some cases, whether it's going to be UN, whether it's going to be OIC, or it's going to be Commonwealth. It doesn't matter, but in each single international organization, that atmosphere is the same, that tension is the same. So that's why Model IC, Model UN, these kind of models are really important for you to get prepared for your future, because you don't know maybe inshallah, may Allah will help you and you will be end up to represent your country in, in international organization. You never know. So that's the things that I would like to share actually in general. Thank you all for listening to me. And I hope I would, I try to do my best to clarify the topics as much as I can. And if there's any question, I'm ready to answer. And before I came here, I informed the OIC Youth General Secretariat kindly. I have a thing to catch up. That's why I need to leave early. I don't want to leave early actually, but I have to leave early. So that if you have any questions, I'm waiting at the moment. Please, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Enes, for such a remarkable presentation to give so many insight about the model OIC, because that is also what many of the new participant in OIC needs, the difference, the insight how is model OIC works. And before we go to the Q&A session, first of all, we as a OIC Youth Indonesia would like to give a great thank you for Mr. Kama Pradipta from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, since that he has another important meeting that he needs to attend to. So we are very grateful. We are very thank you for Mr. Kama Pradipta for joining us, give his time, and thank you. And hopefully we can meet again in the next agenda. And now for the new we're going to open some question answer for Mr. Enes. For the first one is from Amanda Sari. She is a YouTube audience. What do you think about the 2025 OIC program in action? And are we as OIC countries on our track progressing those program?
Well, which agenda you mentioned? OIC
The holistic,
2025?
sir. So we know that there is some 2025 OIC
Program
program.
or program of action. Yes.
Yes.
Well, actually, I don't have that much expertise on OIC's 2025 action plan of action, but what I observed from my experience that I'm working in OIC inside of OIC system, actually for 3 years, and I can say that OIC is its 50th year of OIC. It has established in 1970, and now it's been 50 years that OIC is working. What I can say that it's still, you can see it as a new institution because there are many challenges, there are many obstacles that in front of us that we need to tackle and solve at the moment. But what I can say that OIC is starting to realize its youth power. And since I'm in ISOF and since I'm in the OIC's youth organization, we have more than 500 million youth in OIC, and it's almost 1/3 of the total youth population of the world, which is huge demographic when you observe it. But it's also a really huge number of challenges that is in front of us that we need to solve at the moment, because these 500 million youth are facing daily problems. They are facing daily struggles. There are many economic, lack of economic power, lack of even access to water. There are many issues, lack of education. There are many issues at the moment that the youth are facing today. And what I can say, what I can also hope in the future, OIC is realizing its youth power, and inshallah, in the future, it will, grow. The potential will grow, and this potential will lead us into, brightest future that we can imagine, inshallah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Enes. And also, there's another question that from the chat box, actually. So the question for Mr. Enes is: have the UN, the United Nations, and OIC made different perspective? Maybe perspective how like conducting a meeting, conducting a consensus, something like that. because we know that United Nations and OIC, some have a different perspective. So what do you think, Mr. Anis?
Well, I don't understand the question properly, but what I understand from the question, of course, these two institutions has totally different agendas. At the same time, they have similar agendas, but they have also different agendas than to each other. What I also know that UN is a member of OIC as an observer institution, and also OIC is a member of United Nations as an observer institution. Um, so of course these two are totally different institutions, and they have totally different agendas at the moment. OIC is mainly focusing on the matters that we are facing in the Muslim world, but UN is in general the world wide problems. Of course, in UN there are many agendas in UN at the moment that are directly related with OIC, and they are also working closely with OIC to solve these problems together. And as ISOIF, we are also working with UN agencies to implement youth projects together, because there are when I say these are two different institutions, it's different in terms of structure and also in terms of in some agendas, since UN is more comprehensive.
Okay. And then probably is the last question for Mr. Anis, that 4 months earlier, that after the launching of the UN Youth Strategy from the UN Youth Envoy, uh, and also it also shows that the OIC is somehow more visionary than UN in terms of youth issue. So what do you think about the model OIC activity and the relevance with the OIC Youth Strategy, sir?
Well, OIC Youth Strategy, it's a good question. Thank you for asking. OIC Youth Strategy has also it has its layer, and there is 14 joint youth action plan inside of OIC Youth Strategy. And Model OIC and the other activities that as ISOF that we are implementing is included in that document. So in in general, this 14 joint youth action is actually try to tackle in each and every problem that youth are facing today to solve these problems. What I mean, economic power, economic empowerment, um, diplomacy trainings, media trainings, what I can also count as radicalization, extremism, Islamophobia. There are many problems that, as you all know, that as youth that we are facing, and OIC Youth Strategy is exactly a document for them to actually, it's kind of like an agenda for us to, pursue and try to implement it as much as best way as we can, so we can, solve these problems accordingly, inshallah.
Thank you, Mr. Enes, for such a great answer to all of the question. The other question will be saved first for the later panel. And for Mr. Enes and Miss Saranjer, sorry, Jaren Sersi from ICYF, we would like to give great thanks and thank you
Thank you.
for all that you have attend your time to be here, give us such incredible speech, incredible remark. Hopefully, happy Ramadan and Karim for all
Thank you.
you,
Thank you
all your
so much.
family.
Thank you
And yeah,
all for having us here. Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Enes and Miss Jaren Sersi. Hopefully, we can meet again in next agenda.
Inshallah.
Since
Inshallah. Thank you so much.
yeah,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
guys. Bye bye.
And now we are going to continue on to our next panel session to Mr. Munir Al-Kari. He is the he is the Middle East, North Africa policy and economic specialist. So I will give you some a brief bio first. Give me a moment. And he is Mr. Munir Akari. He is the Middle East, North Africa policy and economic specialist. So he is such a remarkable man as well, because he is from Harvard Kennedy School, London School Economic and Political Science, and many more. And therefore, this topic are very, very great to be discussed, because we also have great men here as well. And you can see all the experience here in this list. Former former expert from the EU Parliament, even for United Nations as well, and even former lead delegate in HNMUN 2012. So we have a very remarkable man here indeed, guys. So I will give the floor to Mr. Munir Al-Kari for give us the presentation. For Mr. Munir Al-Kari, sorry. Okay, time is yours, sir.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to OIC Youth Indonesia for hosting this lovely session, and for all the lovely fellow panelists and members of the Foreign Ministry who are present. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to speak about such a wonderful world that we live in, and the dynamic and complex institutions that we all live in. I was thinking about what could be most relevant for us to discuss, and I thought, you know, there are hundreds and thousands of papers and articles and studies done on how international organizations work and arrive to conclusions and arrive to decisions and the decision-making process. And I thought what would be more fruitful, perhaps, and what would be more engaging is, instead of delving into the mechanics of these international organizations, if I just give you a little bit of my experience and the day-to-day experience that I personally have had working within these organizations. As you all know, these organizations are, for example, the European Union, where I worked, or previously at the United Nations. A lot of these organizations are extremely vast. They're very old organizations. The European Union initially was set up after World War II. The United Nations recently celebrated its 75th anniversary. These organizations have decades and decades of institutional experience. And so in the world that we live in today, in the world that is full of technology and advances, and as technology begins to disrupt everything from how we study to how we do healthcare to how we communicate and transport, some institutions in the world remain stubborn to how things have been done for a very long time. So before I go into this, I think a perspective to have for any young person who is passionate about a career in international affairs is to look at everything, not just to understand it, not just to understand how the mechanics, the decision-making works, but stand at the very forefront of these institutions and look back and ask yourself, how can we reform? How can we apply new tools? How can we apply the new technology that we have to make decision-making processes easier, to make the technology adaptable to decision-making, to how we communicate, to how we adopt resolutions, to how different missions or international organizations conduct their affairs. This is a very important one, especially for us as young people, and especially for members of OIC Youth who are entering this huge world, to understand that our generation is perhaps the most global, the most connected, the most mobile, the most informed generation that has ever lived. And so we have this added advantage, added value as native technology, as a native technology generation, to really look at the world from a different angle and look at the decades of how international organizations have functioned, and then see how we can add and reform. Give you a little example. I'm originally from Libya, and as many of you may well know, Libya has had a very serious armed conflict for many years now, especially since 2011, and then much increased again after 2014. At the core of the United Nations, at the core of why the United Nations was created, is to ensure that there is a degree of stability and security around the world. So when I look at a conflict that is happening in my own country, that is happening for many, many years, and then look at how the international organizations work together in the UN Security Council, in the General Assembly, in the missions that are sent, and understand why a conflict as serious as this, or the conflict in Yemen, or the conflict in Syria, why a conflict as serious as these conflicts continue to happen, continue to go on without any serious results. It's a huge reflection point to understand, are these institutions as effective, or are these institutions really serving the goal that they are here to bring? And if not, then what is the main issue? If not, why have these organizations really stumbled? And this is something that I would like to kind of shed light on as I discuss the decision-making process. To go into that, I want to maybe begin and give you a little bit of oversight over how my experience was. In 2015, I worked briefly with the Irish mission to the United Nations as part of the UN delegation to the UN. Here was an interesting insight for me to understand during the UN General Assembly, to understand how a lot of the resolutions were passed. I worked with the first committee and the third committee. Here's exactly what we did, and here's what's really interesting in terms of understanding how many institutions are involved in just one proposal or in one motion, or putting forward a country's interest through the United Nations machine, through a resolution. So I would report to the Irish mission at around 7 a.m. every morning. Here, what we do is two things. The first thing we do is we meet with the delegation, and we discuss the resolutions that are to be discussed or to be voted on during the day at the United Nations. This meeting will take approximately 1 hour, where we go through all the different resolutions taking place and what the country's position is from that resolution. We then communicate with the headquarters of the Foreign Ministry Affairs. So this is the second meeting, right? After we finish our own mission meeting, we move on to the second meeting, and that is communicating directly with the headquarters of the Foreign Affairs. That is often the capital of your home country. So you're communicating via video conference, and we would discuss, for example, if the resolution was about the death penalty, we would initially discuss what Ireland's position is on the death penalty. Then, once we have formulated the conclusion, once we have our advice, we put forward our advice as experts, we begin to have this conversation via video conference with the headquarters in Dublin, for example. Here we discussed with perhaps the foreign minister or head of the department what the granular details are of this resolution. They don't usually have to know all the details, but for us to at least give them a strong sense of what is being proposed and what our recommended position is in terms of this resolution. This discussion can go on for as simple as 10 minutes. If everything is already clear, we just get the approval, the go-ahead, the green lights, or it can take up to 1 hour, where our position can be different from the position of the headquarters, and we need to discuss exactly what the priority of the country is based on the government, based on the foreign minister, based on the laws of that country, and what the country's interests are and what it stands for. Okay, so far you have two meetings that would have probably ended by 8:30 a.m., right? Here is a really interesting third step. Every member of the European Union, all 28 member states back then, now it's 27 member states after Brexit, all EU member states will then go together, the representatives will go together separately, depending on which committee you represent. So because there are approximately 5 or 6 committees at the UN General Assembly, you go and sit in the meeting that in the committee that you represent at the European Union delegation. Here, all the member states sit together, and we try to ensure that we are all on the same page, that the European Union votes as a block. We are voting yes, or we are abstaining, or we're voting no at the same, as an agreement. But how do we do this? And how can you convince 27 countries to agree to one thing? It's the same method that I am sure takes place in the model UN structure. It is that you go through the entire resolution and you see where there is resistance to certain parts of the resolution, and this is then discussed. So if usually there isn't a huge resistance to a lot of it, and usually that discussion, if it's major, will happen behind closed doors or beforehand. But what happens is you would go through the entire resolutions. For example, if there's 10 points in this resolution, and if at any point a member state would like to discuss changing a word, changing a phrase, adding a word, we would ensure that every other member state also agrees. This ensures that we vote as a bloc, that we are unified in the decisions that we take in front of the larger UN body, in front of 190 or more than 190 countries. And it ensures that the European Union stays a strong voting bloc when faced with facing different international issues. And it's a really interesting method for to understand how a strong union can bring together, the importance of bringing together so many strong economies, a strong union, and making sure that a strong voting bloc is seen. And so other countries who often are not meeting prior to the meeting as a bloc, are looking at what the European Union is going to vote, right? Because once other countries understand that the European Union, all 27 member states are voting a certain way, they will begin to weigh their own options. Why are they voting a certain way? What are they seeing that we are not seeing? What are their interests as opposed to ours? And this would usually end around 10 a.m. And from there, you would directly head to the United Nations headquarters. You would go to your committee and you would begin the formal voting process and discussion process. Of course, there are informal committees, there are discussions in between, as the previous speaker, Anas, has mentioned. A lot of this involves a lot of behind doors discussions. There's a lot of informal discussions where a lot of member states come together, and some of these can be very heated. For me, this back in 2015, when I first joined, it was my first exposure to a formal UN body system. And just like Mr. Ennis has explained, I was in part, a lot of, we were advised to, if you have a position, you have to be strong about your position. You have to have not only the knowledge of what the issues are, not only the knowledge, the subject matter knowledge of the human rights issues in different countries, or the international affairs or economic policy issues, but you should also have the skills to communicate, the skills to convince, the skills to debate, the skills to listen, the skills to build relationships with other member states, with other delegates. These skills can come in many different forms. They can be sustained over a long period of time. These skills can also involve knowing many different languages. And sometimes it is very impressive to be able to speak to other delegates with different languages and their own language to be able to build that bond. And the more you're able to use your soft skills and not just your core knowledge, the more you're able to use your soft skills, the more you are an effective diplomat who is able to communicate a strong vision to other member states, communicate the interests of your own member, of your own country or your own block's interests, and be able to convince other member states perhaps that this is also in their best interest to move forward in a certain way. So for me, that was a particularly interesting experience, and one that anyone can learn from in terms of understanding the power of bringing countries together and voting as a bloc, and being able to create a sense of understanding between the countries so that they can have a strong presence in front of the international organizations. I'll talk a little bit more, maybe I'll add a minute or two about my experience with the European Union. I worked briefly with the European Union between a little bit after that in 2017. The European Union is slightly different from the UN. Now, the European Union also came after the World War II. It was initially an organization that involved promoting economic cooperation. And slowly after it promoted economic cooperation, it came, because naturally it came after World War II, it also ensured that this economic cooperation enforced security amongst its member states. So it became economic and security at its core, and naturally there's the political element that grew from that. And the European Union, at its core, are three different institutions. The first is, there's no particular order, but the one I want to mention the first is the European Council. The European Council is a very interesting organization because it's a body that brings together ministers of all the 27 member states. These ministers, it could be the prime minister, or it could be the collective ministers of financial affairs, collective ministers of agricultural policy, whatever the ministers are, they bring the ministers together of the European Union to discuss the broad goal or the broad objective of the European Union, or the direction the European Union wants to take on certain issues. For example, if there is a massive debate, for example, now during COVID-19 coronavirus, on the direction member states should take for agricultural policy, then this is where they decide on this general direction. It is, in that sense, it is kind of the brain house of the European Union, where we understand, okay, here's an entire body. Here's a body that represents 27 different countries, more than 560 million people. How do we move forward? What direction do we want to take on the big issues of the day? Okay, so this is the European Council. The second main out of the three, the second main institution is the European Parliament, which is where I work. So the European Parliament has two main roles. The first is to set the budget of the European Union, and the second is to debate and issue legislation like any parliament in the world. And it is a powerhouse because the European Parliament is the only directly elected institution in the European Union. So individuals across the European Union directly elect their members in the parliament. It is considered the most democratic body. And so it's a room for all the big issues to have to be debated in the body. There's more than 750 members of the Europe, so it's quite a large parliament, and they have two main headquarters, one in Strasbourg and one in Brussels. And between all of that, you have the same structure of committees where they meet to discuss the different issues, and within those committees, you debate the main issues of the day and you issue legislation, and then that is passed on to the third institution that I want to mention, and that is the European Commission. So just to recap, you have the European Council, you have the European Parliament, and then now you have the European Commission. What is the European Commission? The European Commission has two main roles. Number one, it is the executive arm of the European Union. That means it is the one that carries out a lot of the policies. So you have about, if I'm not mistaken, you have at least 19 departments or ministries. We don't call them ministries, we call them departments, but the function of these 19 departments is to carry out plans and programs in the European Union and around the world. So we have for example, DEFCO, Department of Foreign Cooperation, Department of Foreign Affairs. You have the Finance Department, the Health, the Transportation, the Agricultural Policy, etc. So aside from the executive, there's another very interesting role the European Commission has, and that is to propose policy. Because the European Commission is at the forefront of executing policy, it is at the forefront of international affairs and the foreign policy of the European Union, it also has the added advantage of understanding what do we need to move forward. And so what it does is it proposes policies to the European Parliament to discuss. And so if you look at all three, you will see that there's a lot of shared responsibilities, but then there's also very unique responsibilities, which is what makes the European Union, like any other international organization, perhaps very large, very bureaucratic, and sometimes very slow, but also extremely representative. And it's for me, it was a fascinating exposure to this macro world. A lot of the time, we wonder how different policies come to place. And one of my main messages to young people is to join international organizations, to become a part of these international organizations, to find what makes you unique about your experience and really exploit that to international organizations. For me, just to give you a little bit of a personal reflection on these international organizations, and I'll end by this. For me, the first thing was that when I joined, both working at the UN or the European Parliament, or later on when I worked with the World Food Programme, for me, at the core, I wanted to know how I was different. There are hundreds and even thousands of people applying to all the jobs at the UN. Why are you unique? What makes your application unique? What makes your contribution to these organizations unique? What I highlighted was the fact that I brought a unique perspective into the conflicts that are taking place in the Middle East. That I lived and I worked in Libya before, and that provided me a unique perspective, in addition to with my Arabic language, to understanding a very sensitive, very volatile part of the world. And so I used that to break into the UN and to make sure that my voice has some impact, has some influence, and I can positively positively influence the course of events, especially where a lot of these institutions at the decision-making tables of these institutions are not representative of the countries that are being discussed or the policies that are being discussed. So it's important for everyone, especially people who come from countries that are not well represented at the UN or international organizations, to be there, to be at the discussion table, to speak up for your demographics, for the different demographics that are underrepresented. Because if you don't, nobody else will. And as we all know, power does not exist in a vacuum. I want to end by saying that international organizations are not perfect, but they are slow, they are bureaucratic, they are very costly, they are sometimes extremely ineffective. But what they do is they try as much as possible to be inclusive. And because sometimes to be extremely inclusive, it means discussing something, you bring it down to its lowest denominator, because you want everybody to agree. And when everybody has to agree on a certain topic, that means the lowest possible understanding or version of that topic is what passes. And this is a challenge for us as young people to find the fine line. How do we reform these international organizations? How do we reform the UN Security Council? How do we, as this new generation, as the most informed, the most global, the most connected generation that has ever lived, how do we bring about this change to these international organizations? And I look forward to hopefully answering your questions and being part of this mission with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Munira Al-Kari, for such a wonderful presentation that give us so many insight about especially in the European Union, since he is the expert in the Middle East, North Africa. And now we're going to the Q&A session. So the first question for Mr. Munir is from Hafiz Al-Azhar University from Indonesia. The question is that, if we want to become a diplomat or ambassador, do we need to be able to speak many foreign languages?
Sure. So the strict answer to that is, it depends on the foreign ministry of your country and what laws and what kind of policies that they have in place for their diplomats. So it really depends. Some foreign ministries hire people who have certain language skills and deploy them to certain languages, and then some of them don't really look into that. As long as you are open to learning new languages, that's fine. I encourage you to look at the website and to look at the criteria of your country. Separately, the more languages you know, international affairs, the more you're able to convince, the more you're able to build relationships, the more you're able to form bridges, and the more you're able to understand the nuances, the granular details of a culture, And sometimes that is very important in building that bridge with other countries. There are things that are said a certain way in a certain country that cannot really be translated. And for you to be able to speak another language is huge in terms of building that bridge. So for example, in addition to English, I speak Arabic. And because I cover a lot of Middle East issues, sometimes when I hear speakers, Arabic speakers or foreign ministers or heads of state say something in Arabic, I know that the meaning of those specific words has a certain impact as opposed to just a translation. So I encourage everyone who does want to pursue these fields to empower themselves. English is an extremely, extremely important language, and learning English very carefully. Find other languages that you love to practice and make them a part of your life. But then also look at languages that are big issues, that have big issues in the world. So for example, Arabic is huge because there is debate every day across international organizations about countries in the Arab world because of the conflict, because of the energy industry, etc.
Okay. Thank you for Mr. Munir for such an incredible speech that also give us a great insight, especially if it is very important if you want to learn more about other language, especially in the big six, French, Arabic, English, Russia, Mandarin, and also Spain. Thank you, Mr. Munir. And now we go to the now go to the next question. This actually from Nadia of UIN Jakarta. The question is this: the Council of Europe has members from OIC countries such as Turkey and Azerbaijan, but they are not in EU, European Union. So how does it affect decision making for issues that relate with certain issue, for example, like the conflict in northern Cyprus and Turkey, Armenia, and also Azerbaijan on the Kojali issue? So what do you comment on that, sir?
Yeah, thank you so much. And actually, that's a very important question. I'm glad you brought it up because in the European Union, there's two institutions that are usually very confused. As I mentioned, the three institutions that I mentioned were the European Parliament, the European Commission, and the European Council. The European Council is usually confused with the Council of Europe. And these are two different, because they both have council in them and Europe in them, they're often confused. The European Council is the one I talked about previously, and that's only members of the European Union, all 27 member states now, and the ministers and heads of states meet to discuss the general big picture direction of the European Union. The Council of Europe, on the other hand, is a different institution. It falls within the remit of the European Union, but it is strictly an advisory body. It's a body that is created, that is inclusive of not just the European Union, but of other member states around the world, third countries or third organizations that can have influence or that are influenced by directly the European Union. Often these countries can be neighboring countries to the European Union or a country that is directly impacted or affected by EU policy, broadly speaking. So that's why distinguishing, understanding the difference between the two is extremely important. The relationship with member states that are around the European Union is always very, very fascinating. The European Union has three categories of members. So first members are the members of the European Union. They are full members. There are 27 member states. Then you have something called second countries. Second countries are countries who are applying to the European Union or in the process of having their status negotiated into the European Union. These are called second members. They're not full members. Some of these members are almost, for example, Macedonia is one of them. For example, Turkey used to be one of them. These member states are closely intertwined with the European Union because a lot of what happens in the discussions are for these countries to become first or to become full members, they need to adapt EU policies. And so they're included in some of the machines of the European Union. Third member states are not not part of the European Union, but they are perhaps impacted or affected or neighboring countries of the European Union, and sometimes they are involved in the decision-making processes, in an advisory capacity within the decision-making processes. And this is what you have here with the the Council of Europe.
Thank you, Mr. Munir, for the answer of the question. And also, there's another intriguing question that from the others, such as from Nabila. In Europe, there are FEMISO, the Forum of European Muslim and Student Organization. So, in those organizations, what role in the EU, especially issues that affect Muslim minority or society? So, what do you think about that, sir?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think it's better for a member of FEMISO to better answer that question. But what I can say briefly is FEMISO is, for those who don't know, FEMISO is
Uh, it seems that Mr. Munir Akari has connection problem.
organization
Okay,
to
sorry.
voice, to represent, to campaign, to advocate for various issues in the European Union. And because they're extremely talented and extremely skilled, they are able to convince some of the members of the European Parliament or some of the committees within the institutions to have a voice at the table when certain issues are discussed. For example, in January, I was invited to the European Parliament along with FEMISO, and we sat down from an invitation from the European Parliament to discuss a release of a report about Islamophobia in Europe. The report was led by a member of the European Parliament named Majid, a former member, and we were invited there to partake in the discussion, to partake in what, for example, as FEMISO, because it is a grassroots organization across Europe, what their perspective is, or what they see, or what their input is on what is happening in terms of Islamophobia across Europe. And for Muslim organizations to have this voice within the European Union, and not just in the European Parliament, but also in the European Commission and the European Council, when issues concerning Muslims in Europe are being discussed, is something that is actually very new in Europe. It's something that hasn't traditionally happened before. And again, because of this new young generation and their ability to be connected, to be mobile, to be informed, and to outreach and to be present across the decision table, these young, smart, intelligent, active members of FEMISO were able to push their voice and to have a voice present at these institutions. I advise you to have a look at their website and their social media accounts. They do a lot of very interesting work with the European institutions here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Munir Akari, for such a great answer. And also another question from the chat from Ilma. The question is, what do you think about the Brexit? Does it make some impact to the countries in another EU? As all we know that several months ago that the British has officially out of the EU. They have already out from the EU Parliament. So, what do you comment on Brexit, sir?
Yeah, sure. Brexit is a very hot topic. I live in London, and I worked when Brexit was voted. I was still with the European Parliament, and so I kind of had an opportunity to live between Brussels and London and see the dynamics of all of this breakthrough. For a lot of member states of the European Union, it was sad for them to see the UK leave the European Union, but essentially it was the decision that was made here from an election, and it had to be respected. And a lot of countries said, if we are not happy with this decision, then the best thing to do is for the UK to completely leave, and then at some point in the future, maybe have another referendum and choose to join again. But of course, that's all kind of many of the discussions of people who want the UK to come back or not to come back, or whether that will ever happen. The fear, I'll just mention two very basic points that are important to acknowledge in terms of the big picture of Brexit. The fear from the European Union is that UK leaving becomes a trend. And what they were initially afraid of is, if the UK leaves, then maybe other countries in the European Union will have a referendum, and other countries start to leave. France starts to leave, Germany starts to leave, Ireland leaves. And so this was a major concern for European Union. And I think this is just my thoughts, but I think from the European Union's perspective, they wanted to make sure that the Brexit deal, which has been taking more than 3 years now and still under the discussion now, they want to make sure that this deal is as difficult as possible. They want to make sure that this deal isn't easy, or they don't get the exact same value as being in the European Union, so not to encourage other countries to leave. So this is a little bit of interesting kind of dynamic that's happening. At the same time, I think for Brexit, it's living here in London, Brexit has completely overwhelmed the institutions, because if you look at an institution that has been part of the European Union for many, many decades, and then suddenly you're leaving, you're looking at every single law in finance and policy, international affairs, and agricultural and transportation, communication policy, looking at all of these laws and trying to separate them from the European Union. And it's a very overwhelming, multi-billion-dollar, hundreds of thousands of people are involved with this. Even an entirely new Brexit department was created to deal with this. So it's a slow process, but it's definitely in motion, and it will definitely happen. From a small insight from my perspective, I think that having worked with the European delegations, I think that if the UK leaves the European Union is now has mainly Germany and France at the forefront of its leadership. Usually it was UK, Germany, and France. Now that the UK is gone, the two strongest economies are Germany and France. But there's a challenge here. Germany is more economically powerful than France, but Germany doesn't like to get involved in a lot of international affairs because of its history. And France is currently facing a lot of economic challenges. And so it'll be interesting to see who, it's a question for me and for everyone here, who becomes the new kind of, the new unannounced leadership country within the European Union. And that's a very interesting kind of question to look at. Thank you for the very good question.
Thank you, sir, Mr. Munir. And also there is another question from Ilham. So this is the question for Mr. Munir. As we know that European Union has representative in several countries around the world, such as the delegate of EU, Indonesia, and many other countries. But the OIC or Union does not have representative in other countries, as far as informed. So why does it differ, sir?
Sure. Thank you. That's a great question. I am not entirely familiar with the organizational structure of the OIC. My understanding is the OIC is a organization of Islamic cooperation that brings together Islamic countries to understand and to discuss and to negotiate Muslim or Islamic issues happening around the world as they occur on the table, and to provide that Islamic or Muslim perspective on different debates. And in that sense, the OIC can play a very instrumental role in terms of shedding light on the views or perspectives of billions of people around the world in these organizations, and usually they are the target countries of the majority of policies that take place. The European Union is a political body that in its missions around the world has two angles. The first is a humanitarian and the second is a political. So every European mission office around the world does these two things. Number one, it works with humanitarian issues, perhaps aid or some form of EU support. And the second is political and economic. It works with the countries and governments. And it's a discussion for the OIC members to have. What kind of vision, or what is the purpose, or what is the role that OIC wants to play in the world? Does it want to have more influence and more impact? Is it organized internally enough, like the European Union? Does it have a parliament and an executive commission and a council? And does it have more than 750 members like the European Union does in the parliament? Does it have a strong enough internal structure to begin to portray different policies and offices around the world? Or is this an opportunity for the OIC to start looking inside first and see how do we strengthen the collaboration between members of the OIC on the issues, and then as a next step, or in parallel, how can that be translated into making sure that if we do have offices around the world, how that can be, how we can translate our policies into these offices.
Thank you, sir, for the answer. And this is probably the last question for Mr. Munir, and this question is actually from myself, because when I heard your speech, you give us a very good insight about how the organization, international organization operates, how they can conduct meeting and those kind of, and it's very, very it give insightful. So my question is actually, I just asking some opinion from you, sir. Nowadays we have so many notion about many international organization is failing, that we should just do ourselves without any rely on international organization. That this is also one of the factor for England to go Brexit out of the EU, because they believe that EU is failing. And same with another country, for example, like the Westerners in US, for example, saying that the WHO due to the pandemic is failing, and many other international organizations. So what do your opinion on this kind of notion that many even world leaders give this kind of thought about, international organization, UN, OIC is not effective? So what do you think, sir?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll give you three main points regarding that. Number one, for example, the US or big countries, the reason they don't like international organizations is because international organizations, by their very nature, they force countries to comply to whatever rules or laws they agree upon. So for example, if the World Health Organization says every country needs to contribute 10% of their GDP to World Health Organization, if you're a member state, you need to contribute. Or if the World Food Program said we need to ensure that every country has certain amount of food stockpile as an emergency, and you're a member state of that country, then you have to comply. Or the very reason why not a lot of countries are part of, this is a more interesting one, the International Criminal Court, is because if you are part of the International Criminal Court, then you have to comply to any rulings that they will have over your own jurisdiction. So a lot of countries feel that, no, I would rather run my own business without the influence of international organizations on me. This is one angle or one perspective. I think the second interesting one is we are living in an increasingly globalized world, right? Everything that we do is becoming more globalized. How we communicate, all our cities all the major capital cities in the world are beginning to have the same brands, the same coffee shops, the same restaurant chains, the same high street brands. And so this kind of globalization, the communication, the connection, the mobility, the connection of ideas is going to be always met with resistance. Anytime there is a massive change in the world, my opinion is it's going to be met with a form of resistance. And so when there is globalization like this, there's always going to be winners and there's always going to be losers, right? And with any change, there's going to be people, unfortunately, left behind from globalization. And I think that this is part of the challenge of globalization. When we look at globalization, what industries are being left behind? What industries are not being included as the world moves forward into technology, as the world replaces people with robots, right? As a lot of the shops that we have here, for example, we don't need as many staff because you can have a machine and you can pay using a machine. So a lot of the anger that comes out from individuals who are being left behind by globalization then translates into governments or political parties that take government and begin to resist this form of globalization. I think this is a big part of why Brexit came about, why the rejection of international organizations came about, why a lot of people who support the US President Trump elected him, because they feel that those individuals will free them from kind of the chains of these global responsibilities. I think a certain other perspective is globalization is an amazing and powerful opportunity for the whole world to come together. And I will make one last point is a big addition to this. And if you look at all the international organizations, a big addition to this globalization is the public-private partnerships. They're becoming more important than ever. And the role that public-private partnerships will now have on either including or making states work together or making states fall apart. For example, Google or Facebook has offices or has users in almost all the countries in the world. So when Facebook wants to enforce a policy and every different member state says, no, I don't like this, yes, I like this, can you take this Facebook page down because we don't like this politician? Facebook has to understand the whole policies of the world in one organization. And so the challenge of globalization is whether these large private institutions want to work cooperatively with international organizations or whether they would prefer to work with states and what influence they have all of that. It's a very interesting debate. I think as young people, I think the majority of the sentiment of young people is that they are for international cooperation, they are for globalization, they are for institutions working together and countries coming, because as much as there are so many negatives about international organizations, they're slow, sometimes they're ineffective, sometimes they're bureaucratic, sometimes they're very costly, but what they do that no one else does in the world is they do bring all the countries together, they do give everybody a voice, and they do allow sometimes very insignificant issues or very micro states to speak up in international forums. Thank you for the wonderful question.
Thank you, Mr. Muni Akari, for the great answer for all the question that we have. And that's it all for all the Q&A session. And before we go into the closing statement, I will provide a brief summary of each speaker presentation. From Mr. Anna's presentation, the important is that and how that we as a newcomer in model OIC, understanding the flow of the system, the systematically how to conduct a meeting, especially how to collaborate in making a resolution, in making sure that the resolution of all model OIC can be comprehensive and can be more productive, and how to make a very good productive discussion within the model OIC itself. And from Mr. Munir Al-Kari, The brief summary. It is how important is the insight, how the international organization really works, especially from the European Union, and how we as a country, for example, of Indonesia, can learn this to become more active in international organization. Furthermore, especially collaboration between EU and Indonesia, and therefore by understanding insight of how they works, we as a future diplomat have a great insight what can we do within the system, because in order to work with the system we need to know more about the system itself. And that's why very important for Mr. Munir Alkari give us very good insight about the system in international organization, especially the EU Parliament and EU European Union is very important because we have a very good activity between Indonesia in EU European Union, especially in youth. And now we are going to the closing statement to close this webinar session. I will give the floor to Mr. Munir Alkari to give his closing statement to this webinar session. Time is yours, sir.
Thank you so much. I just want to close by encouraging you all to get involved in policy, to get involved with your foreign ministries, to be also involved with international organizations. There are so many positions, there are so many roles, there are hundreds and thousands of them online. I encourage you all to apply to be part of this because it is so important for us to be present on the decision table. It's so important for us to have a voice, to represent our demographics, to represent our peoples, to represent the different religions and cultures and ideas that we have that are often missing from the table. And as you know, power does not exist in a vacuum. So if you're not there, there are other people there. And if other people are there and your opinion and your country and your religion and your background or your culture is missing, then that's completely absent from the power, the influence, the interests that are going to unfold around the world. And for us to have a more dynamic world that shares all the different cultures and has all the different ideas for us to move forward as a society, as a humanity. As Muslims, we want to advance the world with different technologies and different ideas. We also need to be present at the table to contribute with our voice and to contribute with that. And with that, I'm always happy to help anyone in any way to apply or to understand where to find these applications, as I'm sure OIC's youth network has. And with that, I wish you all the best. I wish you Ramadan Kareem. I want you all to stay safe, inshallah ta'ala, and your families. And I look forward to, inshallah, hopefully soon visiting you all in Indonesia and meeting you in person. Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mr. Munir Alkari, for the great closing statement for our webinar. We actually have a representative from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, from Mr. Yudanto Wibowo. If you have any kind of comments or closing statement to our webinar, sir, you can proceed, sir. Time is yours, sir.
Yes, thank you, moderator. Sorry for the background. This is like my actual home, so I will change my background to something different. So yes, first of all, I want to thank you, the OIC Youth Indonesia, for arranging this meeting and also all the speakers today. It was indeed a very fruitful conversation, fruitful meeting. And yeah, like all the speakers said, that in order to for us to be more engaged in the international organization, particularly in OIC, we have to know the system. We have to know the OIC inside out. We have to learn for it. And I hope and I'm sure that all of you can be a great diplomats and yeah, very much a very successful study for you guys, and I hope we can see each other in other engagement, in other forum. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Yudanto Wibowo, representative from Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And that's conclude of our webinar session in webinar MOIC Introduction Part 6. And before I, as a moderator, to close this webinar, there is a form, a feedback form in the chat, group chat. You can click that link so you can give us feedback on how the webinar session is going, what do you want comment, and what do you suggestion for the next webinar, how we can make it better in the future. And before I close, I would like to say thank you as OIC Youth Indonesia again for all the panelists, to Mr. Munil Akari and also Mr. Enes Ostoprak, and also from Mr. Yudanto Wibowo from Ministry of Foreign Affairs for attending our webinar session. Hopefully, this session will give us so many insight, so many knowledge for all the participants, especially for us who want to have interest in international relation, diplomacy, and negotiation, and many more. And before I close again, please follow us and comment us in Instagram at OIC Youth Indonesia, so you can stay tuned for more upcoming event in OIC Youth Indonesia. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. We have YouTube channel as well at your OIC Youth Indonesia, to stay tuned of our live stream in YouTube. Thank you, everyone. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and happy Ramadan Karim for all you guys. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih semuanya.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Makasih banyak. Ada Kang Yosi, ada Bu Cindy dari Kemlu juga, ada Mas Ryan dari RGI Al-Azhar, dan kawan-kawan ada Kak Bunga, ada Fauzan, ada kawan-kawan Nabila dan lain-lain. Ya.
Sama-sama Mbak Astrid.
Ya.
Thank you guys for attending our event. See you next webinar session, guys. See you.